Commander Serath has a reputation that precedes her throughout the joint human Thessari military facility, and that reputation creates a specific kind of distance, not enforced by regulations or by direct commands, but maintained through the collective instinctive avoidance that humans and Thessari both employ when they recognize someone as fundamentally dangerous. The reputation is earned. Serath is decorated combat veteran with 15 years of active service, most of it in contexts that required the kind of close-quarters violence that leaves psychological impact on everyone involved: combatants, witnesses, and the warriors who survive it, carrying the physical and mental scars that such combat produces. 15 confirmed kills in close combat situations, where close combat means fighting at distances measured in meters or less, where you see the person you're killing, where the violence is intimate and brutal rather than abstract and distant. Survived injuries that medical documentation indicates should have been fatal. Plasma burns across 40% of her body, explosive trauma that fractured multiple bones. The kind of damage that kills most people, but that Serath recovered from through what the medical reports describe as exceptional physiological resilience and extraordinary pain tolerance. Known throughout Thessari military circles for tactical ruthlessness, making decisions that achieved mission objectives, but that left psychological impact on allied forces who witnessed her methods, who saw what she was willing to do to accomplish assigned goals, who understood that her effectiveness came partially from complete absence of hesitation, when violence was the tool that mission required. She's been assigned to the joint facility as combat tactics instructor and liaison between Thessari Military Command and the facility's Defense Applications Research Division. She's competent in these roles, professional. She follows protocols, maintains appropriate conduct, fulfills her responsibilities without creating disciplinary issues or interpersonal conflicts. She's never threatened facility personnel, never displayed aggression toward humans or civilian Thessari, never violated the strict behavioral codes that joint military facilities require from all personnel regardless of rank or combat history. But everyone knows what she's capable of. The reputation communicates that knowledge constantly, through the combat decorations visible in her service record, through the scars visible on her arms and neck, through the way she moves with the controlled precision of someone whose body has been trained as weapon, and whose instincts have been honed by situations where violence was survival requirement. That knowledge creates distance. When Serath enters the facility cafeteria, conversations don't stop. That would be too obvious, would violate the professional courtesy that joint facility culture requires. But they thin. People finish sentences more quickly. Topics shift to safer subjects. Voices lower slightly in that instinctive way that happens when someone enters a space, and everyone present becomes more careful about what they say and how they say it. Movement patterns adjust subtly, not dramatically. No one flees or obviously avoids her, but people choose different routes through the cafeteria to avoid passing too close to where she's getting her meal. Find reasons to leave tables that are near where she typically sits. Maintain careful space that's wider than normal social distance, but not so wide that it could be called out as deliberate avoidance. Eyes slide away when she looks up. Not obviously. Not in ways that would be unprofessional or that would violate the diplomatic courtesy that alliance partnership requires. Just the small instinctive redirect, meeting her gaze briefly, and then finding something else to look at, ending eye contact more quickly than normal social interaction would dictate, avoiding the sustained attention that might be interpreted as challenge or that might invite engagement. It's collective behavior, not organized, not discussed, just the emergent pattern that develops when a group of people, human and Thessari both, encounter someone they recognize as dangerous and respond by maintaining distance that feels safe. Serath sits alone, always. Not because tables are unavailable or because facility policy restricts where she can sit. Because when she chooses a table, Other people who were sitting there find reasons to finish their meals and leave, and people looking for seating choose different tables even when the one where Serath sits alone has multiple empty chairs. The isolation isn't hostile, it's just persistent. The careful space that everyone maintains. The way conversations continue around her but never include her. The eye contact that slides away. The friendly interactions that happen throughout the cafeteria between humans and Thessari, who are building professional relationships and cross-cultural friendships. None of that extending to the dangerous warrior, who everyone knows is capable of the kind of violence that most facility personnel have only encountered in abstract briefings rather than in lived experience. Serath's expression during these meals is professionally neutral. Her skin colors show controlled silver, the shade that Thessari use when they're maintaining emotional restraint, when they're managing internal responses that they're not allowing to show externally. She eats efficiently, reviews work on her data pad, completes her meal in the minimum time that consuming adequate nutrition requires. She doesn't show hurt, doesn't show loneliness, doesn't show the emotional impact that sustained isolation produces. But the isolation is there, visible in the empty seats around her, in the conversations that happen everywhere except at her table, in the careful distance that everyone maintains. The facility cafeteria during lunch period is filled with people, humans and Thessari eating together, building the relationships that joint operation requires, the social connections that transform allied species from diplomatic abstractions into colleagues and friends. Everywhere except around Commander Serath, where distance is maintained not by orders but by instinct, where danger is defined by isolation that everyone contributes to maintaining, but that no one openly acknowledges. She sits alone at a table designed for 6, eating her meal, professionally neutral, carrying the reputation that creates the space around her. That's the pattern, the established dynamic. The way the facility has learned to function around the dangerous woman whose capabilities everyone respects and whose proximity everyone avoids. Until Dr. Sarah Chen enters the cafeteria and disrupts the pattern with nothing more than eye contact and a smile. Dr. Sarah Chen has been assigned to the joint facility for 6 months as medical officer, specializing in trauma treatment for both human and Thessari personnel. And she has learned through that service that medical work requires seeing people as patients first and as collections of reputation, rank, or history second, a perspective that sometimes creates different responses than the ones that facility culture has established as normal. She enters the cafeteria during the lunch period when it's at peak capacity, multiple shifts overlapping, the large space filled with the ambient sound of conversations, movement, the social dynamics of people taking breaks from demanding work, and using meal time to build the relationships that make joint operation function effectively. Sarah goes through the meal service line, gets her lunch, and scans the cafeteria looking for a place to sit. She's still relatively new, recognizes many faces, but hasn't yet established the regular social patterns that longer-term personnel have developed, hasn't yet absorbed all the unspoken rules about facility social dynamics. Her gaze sweeps across the room naturally, taking in the various tables, the groupings of personnel, the available seating options. Her eyes pass across a table where a Thessari woman sits alone despite multiple empty chairs. Commander Serath. Sarah recognizes her from facility briefings and from having reviewed her medical file when familiarizing herself with personnel health records. Knows the reputation, combat veteran, decorated warrior, known for tactical effectiveness that came with psychological cost. Their eyes meet. Sarah doesn't look away, doesn't show the subtle flinch or rapid redirect that the facility's collective habits have established as the normal response to making eye contact with Serath. Doesn't employ the careful diplomatic glance and away that people use when they want to acknowledge someone's presence without inviting engagement. She simply meets Serath's gaze directly, holds it for a beat, and smiles. Small smile. Genuine, The kind of natural, friendly expression that happens when you make eye contact with someone across a crowded room and you're acknowledging their presence in a positive way. Not challenging, not nervous, not the careful diplomatic smile that people perform when they're maintaining courtesy while also maintaining emotional distance and making clear they're not actually seeking interaction. Just a smile, natural, friendly. The kind you'd give to anyone you made eye contact with in a cafeteria when you're all just people eating lunch together. The moment stretches. 3 seconds. 4. Sarah maintains the eye contact and the smile without discomfort, without the urgency to end the interaction that usually drives people to look away from Serath quickly. Serath's expression is difficult to read, her professional neutral mask holding, but something in her eyes registering the unusual nature of this interaction. Her skin colors show surprise briefly, white flashing across her features before returning to controlled silver. The cafeteria's ambient noise continues. Conversations proceeding at other tables. The social dynamics of the facility lunch period unfolding normally, but something in the immediate space between Sarah and Serath has shifted. Sarah breaks the eye contact, not with the quick redirect that would signal discomfort, but with the natural flow of someone who's acknowledged another person and is now continuing with what they were doing. She returns her attention to scanning for seating, processing the cafeteria's layout and available options. And she notices something that her medical training and her relative newness to facility social dynamics makes visible. Commander Serath is sitting alone at a table with 5 empty chairs, while other tables in the cafeteria are crowded with people sharing space, conversations flowing, the social dynamics of lunch period creating density everywhere except around the dangerous warrior. Sarah makes a decision. She walks towards Serath's table, not hesitantly, not with the performance of bravery that would suggest she's forcing herself to do something difficult. Just walks over naturally, as though approaching someone sitting alone at a table with empty chairs is completely normal behavior rather than something that violates every unspoken rule the facility has developed. The change in ambient sound is subtle but real. Conversations don't stop, but they shift slightly, people noticing without openly staring, awareness spreading that the new human medical officer is walking toward Commander Serath's table instead of choosing one of the many other seating options. Sarah reaches the table. Serath is watching her approach with expression that's still professionally neutral, but with skin colors showing uncertain purple mixed with the controlled silver, processing something unexpected, trying to interpret behavior that doesn't match the patterns the facility has established. "Mind if I join you?" Sarah asks, her tone carrying the same natural friendliness that her smile communicated. Everywhere else seems pretty crowded. It's objectively not true. There are other tables with available seating. But it's socially acceptable fiction, the kind of polite phrasing that allows someone to choose to sit with another person without making the choice itself into significant statement. The cafeteria goes very quiet. Not completely silent, that would be too obvious, would violate professional composure. But conversations lower, people maintaining enough control not to openly stare, but absolutely everyone within observation range is aware that something unusual is happening. The new human medical officer just asked to sit with Commander Serath, the person everyone else carefully avoids. The dangerous warrior whose reputation creates the isolation everyone contributes to maintaining. Serath studies Sarah for a long moment, her expression unreadable, her skin colors cycling through uncertain purple, surprised white, and something that might be cautious gold before settling back to controlled silver. She gestures to the empty seats. The movement is economical, precise, carrying none of the warmth that social invitation typically includes, but also carrying no hostility or rejection. "Sit," Serath says. The word is neutral. Not welcoming, not unwelcoming. Just acknowledgement that Sarah's request has been granted. Sarah sits, sets her meal tray down, begins eating her lunch with the same natural ease she brought to the entire interaction. Sarah takes a few bites of her meal in comfortable silence. Then, with the same natural friendliness that characterized her smile and her approach, she makes casual conversation. "The food here is actually pretty good," Sarah observes. "I was worried that joint facility catering would try to find some middle ground between human and Thessari cuisine and end up making both worse, but they've kept things separate and just offered both options. Smart approach." It's small talk, cafeteria conversation, the kind of light interaction that happens between people sharing a table without deep social connection, comments about food, facility conditions, the mundane details that make up casual social interaction. Serath processes this for a moment, as though she's uncertain how to respond to being addressed with casual friendliness, rather than with the careful formality that most people employ when interaction with her is unavoidable. "The Thessari options are adequate," Serath says eventually. Her voice is controlled, precise, carrying the same professional neutrality as her expression. "Better than field rations, worse than home cooking." "Same with the human food," Sarah agrees. "Institutional but competent. I had worse in medical school." Another few bites in silence. Sarah appears completely comfortable with the quiet, not feeling pressure to fill it with constant conversation or to perform social engagement. Around them, the cafeteria is gradually returning to normal ambient sound levels, though Sarah notices that several tables maintain unusual awareness of her interaction with Serath. People not openly watching, but clearly tracking the situation peripherally. "You're the new medical officer," Serath observes. It's statement rather than question, but it invites response. "6 months now, so not that new anymore," Sarah says, "but still learning facility dynamics, still meeting people, still figuring out where things are and how things work." "Your human specialty is trauma treatment," Serath continues. It's not question. She's clearly reviewed Sarah's credentials or accessed her personnel file. "Emergency medicine with trauma specialization, yes," Sarah confirms. "Both human and Thessari physiology, though I'm still learning the nuances of cross-species treatment protocols. The medical differences are significant enough that approaches that work for humans don't always translate directly." Serath's skin shows contemplative blue briefly. "You've reviewed my medical file." It's observation, but there's something underneath it. Awareness that if Sarah reviewed medical files, she knows about the injuries, knows about the damage that Serath sustained and survived, knows the medical documentation that supports the reputation everyone else is avoiding. "I reviewed all senior personnel medical files when I arrived," Sarah says matter-of-factly. "Standard practice for facility medical officer. Need to be familiar with everyone's health history, current conditions, any ongoing treatment requirements. Your file was remarkable from a medical perspective. The recovery from injuries that typically have very poor survival outcomes was impressive. The resilience documented across multiple trauma events suggests exceptional physiological adaptation." She pauses. "That's medical assessment, not judgment about the circumstances that produce the injuries. My job is treating the damage, not evaluating the context that created it." Serath is quiet for a long moment, her skin showing colors that Sarah can't fully interpret, gold mixed with uncertain purple mixed with something that might be relief. "Most people avoid sitting with me," Serath says. "Not accusation, not self-pity, just observation of reality. They maintain distance. They know my reputation and they choose to interact with me minimally or not at all." "I noticed that," Sarah acknowledges. "Noticed you always sit alone even though this table has 6 chairs. Noticed people choosing other tables even when they're more crowded. Noticed the pattern of avoidance. And yet you chose to sit here," Serath observes. "Because the avoidance seemed lonely," Sarah says simply. "And because I'm a doctor. I'm trained to see people as patients, as individuals with medical needs, personal histories, specific conditions, rather than as reputations or collections of concerning behaviors. Your reputation is noted. Your combat history is documented. The violence you're capable of is clear from your records. But none of that changes the fact that you're a person eating lunch alone, because everyone else decided that your dangerous past makes you too dangerous to acknowledge with basic friendliness. Sarah continues. And that seemed sad to me. So when you looked up and we made eye contact, I smiled. Because you're a person. And when I was looking for a place to sit, this table had empty chairs and you were here alone, so I asked to join you. Because sitting with another person seems more pleasant than sitting alone. Serath's expression shifts, the professional neutral mask cracking slightly, revealing something underneath that might be surprise, might be gratitude, might be the emotional impact of someone treating her as worthy of normal human kindness rather than as reputation to avoid. You're not afraid, Serath observes. Of you specifically. No, Sarah says. I'm aware you're dangerous in combat contexts. I'm aware you've survived situations that killed others and that you've inflicted violence that most people haven't experienced. But you've never threatened facility personnel. You follow protocols. You do your job professionally. The combat effectiveness that makes you dangerous in military contexts doesn't make you dangerous to me as a colleague eating lunch in a cafeteria. Most people don't make that distinction, Serath says. Most people let fear override observation, Sarah replies. They know you're capable of violence, so they avoid you regardless of context. That's understandable. Fear is a powerful motivator. But it's also sometimes incorrect. You're dangerous in specific contexts. That doesn't mean you're dangerous in all contexts or to all people. She finishes her meal. Anyway, thanks for letting me join you. The lunch was good and the conversation was pleasant. I hope you don't mind if I sit here again when our schedules align. It's nice having someone to eat with. Serath's skin shows warm gold, the first unguarded positive emotion Sarah has seen from her. You're welcome to sit here whenever you wish, Dr. Chen. Sarah, she corrects gently. We're colleagues sharing a lunch table. First names seem appropriate. Sarah, Serath acknowledges. The use of first name, informal, friendly, treating Sarah as person rather than as rank or role, communicates acceptance of the social connection Sarah is offering. Over the following weeks, Sarah continues sitting with Serath during meals when their schedules align, never making announcement about it, never performing bravery, just treating it as normal, as two people who work in the same facility sharing a table during lunch because that's what colleagues do. Others begin to notice that Serath's demeanor subtly changes during these interactions. 3 weeks after Sarah first sat with Serath, Captain Marcus Webb, human military liaison officer who's been at the facility for 2 years, observes them having lunch together and later asks Sarah about it with genuine curiosity rather than judgment. I noticed you've been eating with Commander Serath regularly, Marcus says during a break between meetings. That's unusual. Most people maintain careful distance from her. Not because of any directive, just because her reputation makes people uncomfortable. I've noticed the distance, Sarah confirms. That's part of why I started sitting with her. The isolation seemed lonely and unnecessary given that she's never been threatening toward facility personnel. She's killed 15 people in close combat, Marcus observes, survived injuries that should have been fatal. Her tactical methods during the Thessari conflict left psychological impact on allied forces who witnessed them. That reputation creates legitimate concern about proximity to someone capable of that level of violence. In combat contexts, yes, Sarah agrees. But we're not in combat context. We're in a joint research facility cafeteria during lunch period. The violence she's capable of in military operations doesn't translate to threat against colleagues eating lunch. People are conflating capability with intent and context with universal danger. You're not concerned that someone with her history might be unstable, Marcus asks. I've reviewed her medical files and her psychological evaluations. Serath says. She shows no indicators of instability, no signs of PTSD that would create unpredictable behavior, no documented aggression toward non-combatants. What she shows is exceptional combat effectiveness in situations that required it, followed by professional competence in non-combat roles. Those aren't indicators of danger to facility personnel. They're indicators of someone who performs their assigned roles effectively, whether those roles involve violence or involve instruction and liaison work. She pauses. The isolation everyone's maintaining isn't based on actual threat. It's based on fear of theoretical danger that her reputation suggests. And that isolation is causing harm, not to facility operations, but to Serath personally. She's lonely. That loneliness is visible in her behavior during meals, in how she sits alone while everyone else builds social connections. So I chose to sit with her, to acknowledge her with basic friendliness, to treat her as a person rather than as a reputation. Marcus is quiet for a moment. Has she ever talked about why she accepts the isolation, why she doesn't push back against the avoidance? We haven't discussed it directly, Serath says. But my assessment, based on observing her interactions and her responses to my presence, is that she's internalized the idea that her combat history makes her too dangerous for normal social connection, that she believes the isolation is justified by what she's done and what she's capable of. She's not fighting the avoidance because she thinks she deserves it. That's sad, Marcus observes. It is, Sarah agrees. Which is why I keep sitting with her, to demonstrate that the isolation isn't inevitable, that someone can know her history and choose proximity instead of avoidance, that her past doesn't define her worth as a person deserving of basic human kindness. Over the following months, the pattern that Sarah established, sitting with Serath, treating her with normal friendliness, choosing proximity over avoidance, begins to shift facility dynamics subtly. A few other personnel start choosing tables closer to Serath, not sitting with her directly, but no longer maintaining the exaggerated distance that had characterized earlier patterns. Conversations continue more naturally when she enters spaces rather than thinning immediately. Eye contact holds slightly longer instead of sliding away instantly. The isolation doesn't disappear completely. Serath's reputation is still known, still creates some wariness. But the absolute avoidance, the pattern where she always sat completely alone, where no one chose proximity, where collective fear maintained total distance, that begins to crack. 6 months after Sarah first sat with Serath, during one of their regular lunch conversations, Serath asks the question that she's apparently been processing since their first interaction. Why don't you maintain distance like everyone else? Serath asks directly. You know my reputation. You've read my combat injury reports. You can extrapolate what kind of violence produced those injuries. You understand what I'm capable of. Why smile when we made eye contact that first day? Why sit here when you could choose any other table? Why continue doing so when the facility's collective pattern suggests avoidance is the safer social choice? Sarah considers her answer carefully. Because you looked lonely, and because danger isn't the same thing as being dangerous to me specifically. You're dangerous in combat, that's documented and clear. But you've never threatened facility personnel. You follow protocols. You do your job. You've been nothing but professional in every interaction I've witnessed or participated in. The rest, the combat history, the kills, the survival of injuries that killed others, the tactical ruthlessness, that's history and context, Sarah continues. It tells me what you're capable of in specific situations. It doesn't tell me that you're a threat to me as a colleague in a cafeteria. It doesn't justify treating you with the kind of systematic avoidance that creates the isolation you were experiencing. I saw someone sitting alone, Sarah says simply. Someone who looked lonely. Someone whose reputation had created distance that seemed excessive given the actual context of our interaction. So I smiled because making eye contact with someone who's isolated, and acknowledging them with friendliness costs me nothing and might mean something to them. And I sat down because sharing a table seemed more human than contributing to the collective avoidance. Serath's skin shows colors that cycle through surprised white, grateful gold, and something that might be the beginning of tears if Thessari physiology produced them the way human physiology does. You're the first person in 3 years of facility assignment who has chosen proximity instead of distance. The first who has treated my combat history as context rather than as definition of my entire character. The first who has acknowledged that I might be lonely instead of assuming that isolation is what someone like me deserves. You don't deserve isolation, Serath says firmly. You deserve the same basic human consideration that everyone deserves, the same acknowledgement of your worth as a person beyond your role or your history, the same opportunities for social connection and friendship that everyone else takes for granted. Your combat effectiveness makes you valuable as warrior and instructor, Serath continues, but it doesn't make you less valuable as a person. It doesn't mean you should sit alone while everyone else builds connections. It doesn't justify the collective decision to treat you as too dangerous to acknowledge with a smile or to share a meal with. She reaches across the table, not dramatically, just a simple gesture, and briefly touches Serath's hand. You're not too dangerous for friendship. You're just someone who did violent things in violent contexts and who carries the weight of that history. That weight is real, and I'm not dismissing it. But it doesn't define your entire worth or determine whether you deserve basic human kindness. Serath's composure cracks. Her skin shows unguarded emotional colors, gold and blue, and something vulnerable that she hasn't shown before. Thank you, she says quietly, for sitting with me that first day, for continuing to sit with me, for disrupting the narrative that isolation built around me, for choosing to see me as a person rather than as a collection of dangerous capabilities. You're welcome, Serath says. Though honestly, it wasn't some grand gesture of courage. I just saw someone eating alone who looked like they could use some company. Everything else, the disruption of facility patterns, the challenge to collective avoidance, that happened because other people were making choices based on fear rather than on actual observation of your behavior. I just made a different choice. The narrative built on avoidance continues to erode over the following year. More people choose proximity. Conversations include Serath instead of excluding her. The dangerous warrior whose reputation created isolation begins to be seen as someone with a complicated past rather than as someone too dangerous to acknowledge. It starts with eye contact and a smile, with one person choosing not to look away, with the simple decision to sit down and share a meal, and it changes everything. They keep their distance from the dangerous alien woman. One human meets her gaze and smiles. Small, genuine, unarmed, not in challenge, not in fear. The moment stretches. Something in her expression shifts, unreadable to everyone else. Human fearlessness rooted in empathy, danger defined